Uh, hey, everybody, real quick before we kick into the conversation about Shift, if you didn't attend the MyBor uh, video with that video on their website later, and just fair warning, it's about as nerdy as it gets. In particular, I think what he had to say about the inventory of houses. It's something we've talked about as a company, but I think there in the last like 20 minutes or so, um, this may actually exacerbate the housing shortage that we have because his prediction was that construction will slow down, that builders are going to stop building, which is going to take our inventory from low to really low, which means that we could see a very fast-paced market in the second half of the year. I think that's actually a pretty reasonable prediction. So anyway, you'll probably find something in it interesting. It's worth some of your time to take a look at that. My board said they'd have it up, I think, by this evening. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Rex. Rex is going to share with us a little bit about just kind of connecting with your sphere and network and what he's been up to in that. And that ties in nicely with the two tactics that he is covering from our book Shift. So Rex, take it away. There it is.
Unmuted. Yep.
There you go.
Hi, guys. Let's see here. Mark, quick point of clarification. You want me to dive into what we've been chipping away at within this current market, and then we'll get to the shift topic later on? Okay, thumbs up. Great. So, what we've seen happen, in our current market is certainly different than what we saw in 08, 09. I mean, just to state the obvious, but I mean, tangibly, 08, 09, we obviously had some big financing hurdles. I mean, we had very few buyers coming out. We had a lot of inventory on the market. We had, we had banking institutions just not doing or not providing some very standard loans, and when they were taking a long. I mean, I think if I remember, I bought a house with a pretty standard residential mortgage. It took over 90 days just to get through the process, and they wanted every piece of financial paper that I had for like the last 3 years. It was, I mean, it was horrible. What we've got now is actually we still have a fair number of buyers who are interested in looking for property. How we have going about getting them and leading them to those properties and showing them ones that they might be interested in has obviously changed dramatically. The supply is just shut down. I mean, it is dramatically decreased. I think I looked last week, and in all of Indianapolis, there were fewer than 90 multi-family properties on the market. It's not uncommon for us to see over 200 this time of year. So that's a big deal. And it's understandable why you've got a lot of landlords, you've got a lot of homeowners who just don't want to open up those properties. At this point, pretty easy to wait. So that's what a lot of people are doing. My guess is there are some pretty great stories that our agents have about buyers working around them to try to get into see properties that sellers do not want them to go into. We've certainly seen it down here. but in this, we have also seen different arenas to generate value and to stay connected with people. A few things that I've put in front of myself and my team as just a goal to continue to lead gen, and really, lead gen is kind of a hard topic for me, or kind of a hard term for me. I mean, ultimately, to stay connected to our community and deepen a relationship with uh, the people we're tied in with. I think that just kind of fits me a little better. But one is, it's hard for me to to over communicate to you how much, respective to, let's say 45 days ago, how much it is valued for someone to make an intentional phone call to touch base and just check in with a friend in the community, to ask them how they're doing, to relay and authentically, just see how that person is and be willing to share the same. Um, I have made an effort to try to make a few of those phone calls every day that I normally wouldn't, and they've been awesome. And not only that, I'd say a decent percentage of the time we do. I mean, probably 2/3 of the time or more, we end up talking about real estate. But that isn't why I'm calling, and I don't bring. It just comes up in the natural course of conversation, which is leading to other opportunities and lead gen tangentially. Um, Another piece that we're doing is, I sent out that sample email with the just kind of a light, uh, you know, estimate of value on what someone's property may be worth, and indicating, hey, if you're having some challenge with cash flow right now, a home equity line of credit could be a pretty quick way to bridge this time. And I have not had anybody say, yeah, help me get plugged into a lender for that. But the response on that, of gratitude for taking the time, and also the referrals that have come out of that simple email have been awesome. Definitely a much higher response rate than I would typically receive with a similar email, had I sent that out, this time last year. Consistently stay on that. If I do, just one a day, takes me about 15 minutes to pull it together. Um, but I get, I mean, close to 100% response rates, a thank you and whatnot, and probably 20% of those people are coming back with some value back to me of, hey, I want to introduce you to my friend, or when we get on the other side of this, here are the things I want to talk to you about within real estate in a next step. So that's been really, productive for to get out to my network. And then lastly, holding a virtual happy hour one a week, and with like 3 to 5 people who know each other and know you, and just bringing them together, connecting. Could be for half an hour, a virtual, a virtual happy half hour. I don't know, but that connectedness and being the instigator to draw that together is something that, man, I haven't seen anybody go, yeah, why in the world would I want to do that right now? No, thank. Like, there's a huge positive response. I see Steve is having a virtual happy hour with us right now. Um, um, I mean, that being that instigator of connectedness and just, some time of levity and you know opportunity to connect with people in that way is just a great opportunity for us to plug in authentic ways and draw people near. And ultimately, the byproduct of that is it will generate leads, but none of like lead gen is not necessarily why we do this. It's just a byproduct of doing it and staying committed to, the process of or the concept of valuing relationship over the lead, over the transaction, however you want to frame it. So those are three things that we're doing that are really simple, that are paying off, but we have to be consistent about them, and they're never going to scream at us. They're never going to rail on like any emergency might. But if you do those little simple things day in and day out that don't have to be monumental, um, ultimately they lead to business. And they lead to business in sustainable ways. Did I get that? Was that good? Is that, where do we go from? Do I have my sound off? Is that, I don't know. Guys, I'm sorry. I'm an almost 42-year-old father of three.
Rex, you're on and you did great. Do you want to go ahead and move into talking about Shift?
Oh, great. That was natural. Okay, cool. So
You're crushing it.
I would love to hear from y'all when you hear the term lead gen or solicitation, like what honest emotions come up for people? Anybody want to pop in? I mean, time, Andrew, yeah. Gross, yuck. There we go. That cold calls. Yep. Woof, I love it. These are not the 4-letter words I thought people were going to use, but it's all good. Great. Smarmy. Yeah. So, I mean, when we get into this topic and this chapter and we start looking at lead gen in general, I think, look, we've all had a lot of bad experiences with being prospected ourselves, right? I mean, you can take it from, just about any sales experience, common sales experience we have, when you're being sold, all right? And that leaves a bad taste in our mouths because, when you feel like you are not valued above the dollar figure that's coming home to the individual on the other side of the table, you look at that and you go, it's honestly more sad than anything, right? Like that someone is effectively saying, I want this, this end, which has a dollar figure to it, right? More than I want a relationship with you. That's how it feels. And we look at that and we turn around and we go, I never want to be that person. And the good news there is that we don't have to be. And in the way that kind of matriculates out, and Keller gets at this in this chapter, is that yes, while we have to develop routines and rhythms and disciplines within lead gen, just like we do customer service, like we do the process of paperwork, just like we do with financial management, like we have to have processes and discipline in those places. But that doesn't mean that in order to lead gen well, we have to check the relationship above getting the deal done or getting the lead in the door, and speaking from that vantage point. As a matter of fact, I would argue that the best engagement around that, he talks about direct and indirect offers, as well as MOFers. Did anybody pick that up? I think it's like make an offer for immediate response, and says always be soliciting an immediate response. I get what he's saying there, but if I can just turn this just a little bit, the best lead gen that I've ever had the opportunity to do and participate in puts the commission check off to the side and authentically works to understand what is important to that individual. And I think the best lead gen I've seen done is indirectly taking a step towards someone around what they value in that moment. And he talks about this in the chapter as well, as engaging that motivated individual around what is most important to them. But I'd take that a step further and say what might be most important to them right now might not have, and probably doesn't have, a damn thing to do with real estate. It may have to do with, I just lost my job and I don't know what to do next. How can we stand in the gap there? It may be, I don't know, we just had our first child and he has not taken a breath in for the first 3 weeks of his life. And I need someone to tell me when this gets better, because right now I'm convinced I've ruined the next 18 years. Which, it could be, I'm trying to drive this change within the community and I have no idea who to talk to about it. And when we're able to take the time to get to know people and to ask good questions and start to stand in those gaps where they may not know what the next step is, or we might be able to help them take those next steps and produce value in the ways that are most relevant to them, what I find more often than not is they model that back as they learn the things that are important to us. And as they get to see us help, them go where, navigate where they're going, that is often returned with joy. So I wanted to just kind of, frame that up. I know he talks a lot about when you see a shift in the market, right? That your lead generation efforts need to increase, which is great. We need to find the motivated clients. I'd say we need to find out what our community is motivated on right now. And eventually it gets to real estate. Okay. Like we all touch real estate in one way, shape, or form. But the minute that people start to feel that that is why we're having the or initiating this work with them, they start to have that transactionalized feeling, because there's a little bit of truth to that, and we know when we're doing it, and we know when we feel that pressure, right? So just keeping that in the lens. I mean, often this lead gen work will never be urgent until it's a crisis reality, and that sucks. And we've all been there. I think the biggest challenge then, and he touches on this as well, is putting the right effort in the right initiatives, And the step one is stop doing what doesn't work. And he talks about listing out like the top 10 things we do, right, to generate leads, and then prioritizing those by what's most effective, and and then crossing off like the bottom 5, right? And then putting the effort we were putting here to the top 5. The challenge with that is knowing, like, how do we evaluate effectiveness? Is that, oh, this is what's driving in the most leads who want to do business right now? And there's nothing wrong with that. But there's also momentum that can be driven in putting together the efforts that will drive in business down the road. And that gets back to some of that direct and indirect offering and whatnot. But I'm acknowledging that the challenge of ranking that within, a prioritized scale is not necessarily simple. But we can look at a list of 10 and pretty well tell what probably isn't the best use of our time right now. Step 2, he gets to figuring out what works, which kind of, gets back to, okay, look, you have this market, or you have this message, you have this method, and they have to match your audience, and they have to match your market area and speak within what's relevant to them within, the different shifts. And, right now, how we're talking to people about financing, how we're talking about people about investment real estate, how we're talking to them about, buying their first home, it is different than it was, 30, 45 days ago. but if we can get the narrative of hope there, I think a lot of the, hesitation that our community feels in real estate right now isn't necessarily that they don't want to proceed. It's often that they don't know how to, right? Like, how do I find the home that I want when I can't go in the home? Like, if I can't do showings, how do I get a loan when I'm hearing that, like, such and such lender, was it Wells Fargo just shut down all their FHA? Was that last week? General nods, anybody? Yes? Yeah. Like, when people start hearing that, it's pretty easy for them to just take the marker out and just strike stuff. I guess we'll just wait. If we can communicate to those who are ready to go, hey, here's the path, and here's the narrative of hope in this. Like, we can get you where you want to be. We have to do it a little differently. Here's what that looks like. We can bridge a pretty big gap and get them on the other side of that, but they are not going to come up with it themselves. So understanding what that narrative is, and not false hope, like legitimately hope we can back up, all of a sudden the credibility jumps through the roof, because we're able to go like, hey, I've got you. Like, I do this all the time. Yes, it's shifted, but there are other avenues to go down. Let me show you the way. When we are able to come at it from that, place, and when that path isn't natural, I mean, I kind of love it right now, because right now I'm getting more credibility than I typically am when I'm matched up with like somebody's like mom and dad, who are often showing up at some point in the showing process, or the inspection. That's a fun one. But being able to say like, hey, this is a different time. Here's how we get there. That credibility is greater and just more powerful now than I think we've seen in the last, 8-9 years at least. So, I look at that, and I look at kind of what, what Keller gets at here. And obviously, like, it says the more we do it, the more natural it becomes. Yes. I think he had a lot of good points in this chapter. The 2 steps, not stop doing what, doesn't work, I think is good. I think, figuring out what works and putting effort to it, absolutely. You've got, marketing for sure. He says time and money are the 2 resources that we have to generate leads. I would add on that, yeah, we have time and money, but we also have relationships, and we have those advocates who we've helped in the past that are also a pretty great resource for us as well. So ultimately, within all this, I think yes, it is about discipline. It is about doing a little bit every day to kind of build on it. But ultimately, gosh, it's hard for me to kind of encompass all this without saying, at a very basic level, experience would say to me, if we engage the relationship above the deal, we will be, it ultimately will make us more money. But let's take it beyond that. We will enjoy this work more, but it requires us to proactively drive the relationship, to initiate those touch points in that relationship in ways that I think most of us want, but if we're honest, we don't do a lot of work towards that in our day-to-day, because it isn't automatically in front of us. We have to think about it, and we have to execute out of that. So those are some kind of my thoughts and ramblings around this topic and this part of the book. Would love to hear anything else you guys have to say, hear any questions, and certainly different viewpoints on lead gen. Nope, I hit it all. It was great. Fantastic. Killed it. Great. This is legitimately where I feel like I actually have been muted this entire time.
You were not. You were audible the whole time. I promise.
Spectacular.
Um, Rex, one thing that might be helpful if you could comment on this. I think you did a good job of picking out like, hey, if Shift and maybe our industry norm talks about lead gen in a certain way and thinks about lead gen in a certain way, some of that we can take out is great. I think you're doing a good job of saying like, yeah, but there are some principles that apply, but you don't necessarily have to do this sort of lead gen that you don't like. So it's not just a one size fits all. Let's say somebody says, yeah, the relationship thing, it is challenging for me. It doesn't necessarily come naturally for me. I've found this, my team has spent a lot of time talking about this, and we're all at different points of the spectrum in terms of how much energy does it take for me to pick up the phone, call someone with no agenda besides, how are you doing? And like, I have learned, I don't view that as something that requires discipline, because I enjoy it. It energizes me. It comes naturally to me, but I know that's not true for everybody on the call. It is true for you.
Yes, it is.
What advice would you give? So let's say there's 10 or 15 people on the call. They're like, yeah, I see the value, but it's just not what comes naturally to me. Any advice to them, or maybe it's materials or resources that they could spend more time reading about this, to get a better understanding of what that does in the relationship, or just thoughts in general of how they could do it?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things here. One, we can talk about this work all day long, but until we actually experience it being better than what we're doing right now, and experience that like alongside others, like it really isn't going to change our belief, and actions. We're just experiential learners. So part of that is, if we have not had that modeled, if we have not seen that walked out, from multiple people relationally, to the point where we can go like, oh, well, that's, get beyond the, well, that might be great for Mark, or, Rex, or, Shanda, or, Trish, or Kelly, or whoever, like that, we have to experience that. I think multiple types of lead gen at a very high relational level before we start to say, okay, here's how this works for me. And now I believe I can do this in this way. So I think the first thing I'd say is get exposed to as much different lead gen as you can. The most easily accessible lead gen is most often the most highly transactionalized lead gen. But I'd say, get around and ask other agents how they're doing it. Seeing, it's a little tougher to get, right next to someone and see this played out. But I think there's a ton of resources online to just see how it's done differently. The other thing I would say is, we all generate value and take steps towards people in different ways. So I may enjoy calling somebody up or coordinating a happy hour or whatnot, but it's kind of a fun game to like look for different ways to drive that value and engage people. Like, I kind of enjoy, just hunting through Facebook and see who's having a really crappy day, and like send them like a bottle of wine through Drizzly, right? Just like, look, I'm sorry today sucked. Here's a $9 bottle of Chardonnay. Like, or I don't know, what do kids drink these days? It's the what is that? Is it the Bear Claw? The White Claw? Yeah, there. So I don't know, whatever. So thank you, Leslie. You know, I had one, you know, client of mine who they just had their first kid, and there was no food at home, and it was a Friday night, and she just had a day, right? And so there was this like rant on Facebook, and like I saw on my little like Papa John's app thing, like I had a free pizza. So I sent like a pizza and a 2-liter over to her house. And you would have thought I donated a non-vital organ to like a direct line relative. But finding those, like, I didn't even have to talk to her. I just went, oh, here's a need. And, you know, and just stepped in a gap there. I mean, if someone loses a loved one, I mean, just sending flowers, it doesn't have to be big and extravagant, but sending flowers, you know, in a note at that visitation, like, I promise you, they see that. I promise you that matters. You know, just
Can I jump in there really quick?
Yep.
A tip Rex gave me a long time ago was if someone loses a loved one, to make a recurring calendar invite in your calendar that says like, hey, this person lost their dad or something on this day. I think that means maybe even more than remembering like when everything is going down on Facebook, like just remembering like, oh, this date is like really important to them, and it's not a date that other people would remember. It's not as typical as a birthday or something. Yeah, I just thought that was a really good tip that I've kept in mind. Rex, back to you.
No, that's right. I mean, so I guess I'd say you don't have to dive into an exhausting, I mean, look, like deep conversation for any length of time. You can find other ways to connect and stand in the gap and you know, communicate value to your community, and ultimately in a whole bunch of different ways that don't necessarily require you know, getting across the table. But if you just do it at a critical mass in the ways that are most enjoyable to you, like, it will return. It always returns.
That's really great. I mean, you gave so many good examples. I would imagine that most of us, if you think about those 5 or 6 different ways of doing it, one of those probably pops out as like, oh yeah, I could really enjoy doing that. I would embrace doing that. And so I think don't get stuck on the, oh, I see how this person does it. That's not going to work for me. Because I think behind how that person does it is genuine relationship connection. And you can find a way that energizes you to do that. That's really great. And yeah, Bear Claws, Rex, those are still donuts. White Claw.
Thank you.
Yep. You could send them together. Yeah, it'd be a good combo.
Tremendous.
We got off to a little bit later than normal start for the MyBoard call, but I know trying to wrap up at 5 is probably still good for everybody's schedule. We still have a few minutes left. Anybody else curious for what, you know, how other people are applying this, or comment?
Is on lead gen. Absolutely terrible lead gen story where it just went horribly wrong. Any of that?
I can say I've tried almost, not every way, but many ways of lead gen. And I think it's one of those things, I think Gary Keller touches on this, like, you just have to start doing it. You have to start doing it, figure out what you don't like and what you do like, and doing it over and over again, because you're never going to like something that feels uncomfortable for you. And sometimes to become comfortable at something, we need to do it over and over again. So I've also never done any type of lead gen that hasn't shown some results, even like the smallest results. And I haven't liked many of those, but they've at least turned out something. And I learned I didn't like it, and I moved on.
Mm-hmm. Is anybody doing anything differently in this market that they found particularly impactful as far as lead gen is concerned?
Rex, I don't have anything right there specifically, but just a general comment. I think what I have grasped from today's conversation, from my past, and from the book and everything else is we all do lead gen, or we think of lead gen differently, and we have our different approach. But I think the most important thing, whether you're emailing, calling, I love how Trisha said Facebook stalking, any of those ways, you just have to be true to yourself, or it's really not going to feel right. And then you will feel, like, woof, this is gross, I don't like it. So it's kind of like what Jess and you were saying, but at the same time, like, once you find what works for you, you have to be yourself and be true to who you are. You can't be someone else while you're trying to do it, or it just will feel even worse. You guys are all amazing at what you do. It's why you're here today. You're trying to learn even more. So keep doing what you're doing. Take these as examples, try them out, but be yourself. That's why you're here. So I just throw that out there as another thought.
That's good.
It feels like right now is like it's a hard time to do immediate lead gen, like lead generation that results in immediate sales. That to me right now feels like kind of that very salesy vibe, and in a time when it can feel really yucky to be that person. Like the whole country's going through this, and then here you are like, hey, want to buy or sell a house? Like it just feels gross. And it is in some ways. But I feel like it's definitely a time for, really strengthening those bonds with pre-existing clients and with people ties. And then, things do come up with referrals because there are still people that need to buy and sell right now and can. And so it just seems like a hard time to do kind of the traditional lead generation stuff and not feel somewhat gross. I did just hear of a realtor that I used to work with who hired a Bagel Boss food truck to come to his neighborhood last night, and he drew off like 6-foot dividers in his driveway and in the street, and he bought the 5 meals in order to get Bagel Boss there, but then he just got a ton of RSVPs from his neighborhood and used his neighborhood Facebook group. And it seemed like it was a very successful. I had mixed feelings about it because on the one hand he's doing it, trying to do it very safely as far as like social distancing together, and yet he also just invited a whole bunch of people to a food truck in a neighborhood when we're kind of supposed to be staying inside. So I feel like you're treading a line, but I liked his general feeling about it. It was just an opportunity to do something nice while people are shut up in their houses and try and stay in touch with people or get to know new people that live near him that might realize it, remember him for later. So.
Yeah. I think, some of the stuff that's been most meaningful to us, we've had some friends who have like made bread and like dropped it off, on our door, like, or margaritas. And like, can you imagine if like your insurance agent did that, you'd be like, dude, I'm with you for life. This is like, you are the best insurance agent ever. And you may be terrible at insurance. I don't know. You brought margaritas, like, win. I think the same is true for us. We're just, there's a lot of people in our networks who are sitting there and they're just, the fact that someone would take that time to think of them and to give that touch means more right now than I think it has in recent history.
I think this is a great moment to say we're coming up on 5 o'clock. Thanks everybody for jumping in.
Wait a second.
Rex, great job. Rosie gets to take it home.
Guys, I just, real quick before we leave, I wanted to let you know that tomorrow we are having our normal monthly agent meeting at noon. And we're having Nicole Jensen from MyBoard come and present on the clear cooperation policy, which starts up in May. And if you guys don't remember, it's talking about restrictions to marketing a property before it goes onto MyBoard. So this is going to be a huge deal. I've watched the presentation already. They've done it a couple of times. This one's specifically for our brokerage. I think it'd be really awesome if you guys can make it. So come to that. And then one last shameless plug. I've recently become the secretary for the Greater Downtown MyBoard division. And we are doing a happy hour tomorrow at 3. So shortly after our monthly agent meeting. And it's a show and tell happy hour. So bring the weirdest thing in your house and your favorite beverage and we'll hang out. So that's all. Have a lovely evening. Bye, everyone.
Bye, guys.